Welcome back to the Futurist New Deal podcast. I'm speaking again to my friend, Dr. Ojochogwu Abdul, and very excited to speak with him. He has a great deal of expertise on transhumanism, and he is a Nigerian organizer of Humanity Plus and a lecturer of great renown. And I'm excited to speak with him again on his chapter from the Transhumanist Handbook, which is titled, and it's a mouthful, Advancing Neutral Monism in Big History and Transhumanist Philosophy. And big history being the operative word here. Let's talk a little bit about big history, Dr. Ojochogwu. But first, how are you today?
I'm all right, and you?
I'm feeling well. I'm glad we have a chance to speak again now in this podcast. So I've interviewed a few people now, including another Humanity Plus organizer of some renown, Natasha Vita-More, on a similar subject about the historicity of transhumanism and technology. Tell us a little bit about your view of big history. Give us a little bit of introduction to this chapter, also for the companion piece that we discussed.
All right, Ben, thanks for having me.
Yes.
Okay, so a big history is this emerging news story. It's a collective effort by several scholars, which looks into, or which is a new way of approaching the origin, the evolution, and the future of humanity, of the universe, and the future of humankind within the universe. The interesting thing about big history is that it combines researches from different disciplines and provides an account of this long story from Big Bang to humankind and several other events in between, the formation of stars, the formation of the planets, life on Earth, human origins, modern civilization, and what comes next after all these large time scales and stages of cosmic evolution. So big history is science-based, but it also draws perspectives from philosophy, from history, and even from some adventurers too, where it shares some complementarity with transhumanism is that narrative of this long story of humankind. It goes far back to the Big Bang, where we're coming from, and then where we're going to. So transhumanism picks up from there in providing answers to the question as to where we're going to, relative to where we're coming from.
Very nice, very nice. And there's some ideas in your chapter that I believe people will be struck by them as being technological singularitarian ideas. Tell me about your impression of the technological singularity, and tell me about where you think we are as a civilization or in Nigeria in terms of moving towards the technological singularity.
Okay, the idea of the technological singularity comes across as one within the tone of inevitability. And if going back to big history and transhumanism again, we take note of several epochs, several moments of historical transformations and significant moments of emergence. It kind of sounds tempting or unavoidable to follow this flow, which led to the emergence of humankind and then the birth of human civilization, technology, agriculture, industrialization. It seems the next logical step. It's this fusion of humans with technology as a kind of its own, and which will lead to a higher level of civilization, which some have called the singularity. Now, again, going by the various stages, previous stages in big history, um, all the way to where we humans find ourselves now, it's a very, very high possibility that the singularity awaits, and the singularity is an eventuality. Um, but then different societies of the world may approach this singularity at different times, except efforts are made to spread the technological opportunities evenly, except efforts are made to make technologies widely accessible and available to the most of humanity, then it may just be the case that some portions of humanity, some more advanced portions of humanity, might get to the singularity while others are left behind. Now, I say this with Nigeria and Africa in mind because the level of technological advancement here is still backward relative to the more advanced societies of the West. And this is the struggle that people like me involve ourselves in advocating for um, a wider um, accessibility to these technologies by people in Africa and other developing countries, such that the movement towards technological singularity will be one that involves all of humankind. It will be a uniform march towards this technological singularity. If it's not done this way, if the technological um, um, if the technologies are not equally distributed, then it might be the case that some portions of humanity would reach the singularity while others are left behind and then become of um, a less kind of species compared to those who advance with the singularity. So there is a serious need to distribute these technologies, make them widely accessible, which I believe is one of the ideals of transhumanism, making technologies widely accessible and available to much of humanity so that humanity as a whole will advance to this transhuman civilization. Yeah.
Mm. Very nice, very nice. And you quoted David Christian in referring to the importance of thinking about big history, and you referred to big history as a map of where we can help. Uh, pardon me, a map of where we are, which can help us decide where to go next.
Yeah, yeah.
Tell us a little bit about this notion of better gaming out the technological singularity, better gaming out similar effects with advanced technology and civilizational shifts there, because of a better understanding of these historically significant lines of thought.
Can you take the question again? I'm not so clear what you.
Oh, yes. Just tell us a little bit about how big history provides a map for where to go next as a civilization.
Okay. The map, it tells us where we come from. It tells us our story as humans. It makes us more aware of our long connection with the universe. Our story is one that goes far back 14 billion years ago to the very origins of the universe. It tells us the evolution about the evolution of stars, of planets, the emergence of life, human origins, and all that. Now, it gives us a sense of appreciation as to who we are, where we come from, and then the current impact or the current significance that humans have on the planet and the potential to expand our role in the universe. Now, this should fill us with some wisdom and responsibility. as we become more powerful with technology. The responsibility should be one that will help us to make, the sense of responsibility should be one that will help us to make right choices as to the actions we take with our technologies. We've come to a point where our actions can affect the planet, can even affect the wider universe around us. Now, the sensibility, the awareness that we come from a long history with the universe should give us this awareness that we have a duty to use our technologies properly, both for a better future for humankind, but as well a better future for our planet and for the wider universe in which we hope to expand our presence. Yeah, so big history, because it provides us with a long backdrop of our connections with the universe and with all life, should guide us in making the right choices now that we have the power that the technology gives us in shaping our life, shaping our planet, and in engineering our universe. So yeah, basically it should serve as a guide and a lesson as to why we should be responsible in using technology to shape our life and the universe around us.
Very nice. Very nice. Now, as I suspect many of our podcast listeners know, I am running for United States President on the Transhumanist Party ticket. And I mentioned this here to a few moments before that. You talked about Nigeria and the prospects for technological singularity in the world and in your country. Do you think that policy and legislative initiatives have a role to play in improving the likelihood of this good outcome for our civilization? And how do you see that being done, perhaps well in your country? How do you see it being improved upon generally in the world or in your country as well?
Yeah, of course, policy has a role to play in determining the outcomes as to how humans get to use our technologies. Policies, when decided upon right political ideals, right political intentions, should provide a framework that would guide how humans get to use technologies for socio-economic, environmental, and other benefits. So both in the United States and in Nigeria, policies are important because not all technologies may be positive eventually. Not all technologies may be for the good of humankind and for the planet eventually. So there need to be some sort of regulatory framework in deciding which technologies to be allowed and which ones to be prohibited, so long as the intentions are not strictly determined by conservatism, but by a rational precautionary principle. So now in Nigeria, the policies, we've not yet gotten to that point where much is discussed in terms of policy making with regards to technologies, because much of the technologies we use here are still more of the basic technological applications. Not many of them are seen as life-threatening. So the policies that are meted out with regards to technologies here mostly has to do with regulating them as businesses. So the businesses that bring in technologies may be regulated in terms of are these foreign businesses? To what extent do we allow them in the country, relative to how they may impede the growth of local businesses or support the growth of local business or the local businesses or the economy in general. Yeah, but of course, in recent times we've had courses to decide on policy over the issue of GMOs, genetically modified organisms, and that had to do with the company Monsanto, which some NGOs in the country raised so much hue and cry over their presence in the country, and so much happened, and there was a lot of misinformation all over the place as to what GMOs are. The alarm that they lead to cancer, the alarm that Monsanto is involved in the conspiracy against local farmers, organic farmers. Yeah, and much fears were raised in terms of the health and environmental challenges that GMOs might pose. So at some point, it had to be taken to the level of Parliament. Several agencies, NGOs were involved in the battle. Religious voices also came in, and we have an agency here called the National Biotechnology Development Agency. They stepped in. There is also the National Biosafety Management Agency. They also stepped in. And with much intervention and much education, GMOs are becoming more accepted in Nigeria based on the enlightenment provided by some of these agencies that are into biotech. But there was a battle they fought against conservatives, both from the religious wing, some from the health wings of NGOs, some from the environmental wings of NGOs.
Dr. Abdul? Shit. Dr. Abdul, can you hear me? Oh, we were doing so well. I'm starting the recording, so it should start again in a moment. And moments ago, we were speaking about Monsanto and also about the popular backlash of various kinds against that company. Would you like to continue your thought, or would you like me to prompt you with another question?
Let me just feel the point I was trying to make there.
Okay.
Hello?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. All right. So would you, did you have more thoughts about Monsanto and this popular push again to regulate in your community? Because I believe that your thought was cut off in mid-sentence. Sir, maybe let's go back to, we have about, Dr. Abdul? Dr. Abdul?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
So,
one moment, sir. Let's turn off the video again.
Yeah, I can hear you.
We have 17 minutes of video, so let's go ahead and just turn off your video. Maybe that will improve the audio.
All right, I've done that.
Okay. All right. So you were saying, tell us more about this Monsanto legislation in your community, if you like.
Okay, yeah. So just to finish what I was saying. The experience with Monsanto and the backlash that that came up against it from much of the Nigerian population, especially as directed by by several NGOs who were informed either by religious beliefs or some opinions in health and science, so to speak. Uh, the the experience some of us got from that was that um, several people in the Nigerian population um, were not so either well informed or um, choose to entertain the fear of anything that is seen as unnatural. In this case now, Monsanto's activities with regards to GMOs were seen as something not natural, something that tampered with nature, but also something that posed a risk both to human health and to the environment. Now, the intervention by several agencies, our National Biotechnology Development Agency here, and even the National Biosafety Management Commission, they intervened by providing series of workshops, series of enlightenment programs, and they educated the public as to the uses of GMOs and as to several safety measures that are taken to ensure that GMOs don't pose risk to human health and to the environment. This helped um, um, reduce the fear and also increased acceptance. It also led to wider acceptance or relatively wider acceptance of GMOs in Nigeria. It's not as if everyone has accepted it, but much of the alarm has ebbed. Now, the lesson some of us picked from that was that um, this is GMOs at the level of engineering, genetically engineering crops, and it is leading to this much furore in Nigeria, up to the point of the issue being even taken to our parliament here. Now, you could imagine the level of tension, the level of alarm that is likely to happen when you now suggest the idea of genetically engineering humans. Engineering crops, genetically engineering crops, was enough cause for worry and for backlash. Um, Now, what would you expect when you now propose the idea of engineering, genetically engineering humans? It shows that there is still much um, challenge to be faced by transhumanism in Nigeria when such ideas as manipulating nature, especially when it comes to human nature, are brought to the fore. But we're taking it bit by bit, and we believe the education that was provided over the GMO issue should present a bit of a foundation upon which to successfully argue in the near or distant future for why it should be desirable, safe, maybe even positive to also genetically engineer humans. Yeah, but at that level too, we could as well anticipate that some level of legislation, some level of policy making will have to be brought in to mitigate the risk, but also hopefully to enable the wider acceptance and distribution of that technology within Nigeria.
Yes, and in thinking about these two basic concerns that are raised by these farmers in this community, there's two main ideas here that should be articulated, and they're kind of blended together. One is the idea that GMOs are dangerous to human beings, which is not demonstrated to any real degree. The other is that large concerns like Monsanto are engaging in predatory business practices and taking resources out of the community, and that or not making a significant contribution to the people living on the African continent. The latter is the more real concern. And I'm reminded in the United States of a term that's often used, globalism, and people like to say this. Oh, it's almost a swear word, globalism.
Yeah.
But it also describes a similar kind of blending together of unrelated notions. An idea of a post-nationalism, a society that is moving towards post-national structures and ideologies, which I don't find terribly upsetting. But they in using this term globalism, they combine that with an idea also of bad business practices and corporate rule, which is, of course, having a negative effect on societies on the African continent and in the United States and the world around. People don't have to do a lot of be reading an awful lot of newspapers to understand that trades like the cocoa trade on the African continent, the diamond trade, and many others that are not as high profile have taken resources out of communities and not paid wages and engaged in horrific practices, and that these concerns should be criticized. What would you say in finding a balance there in seeing that people are better treated on the African continent and also advancing scientism and technoprogress as an ideology?
All right. In the first place, scientism doesn't really come across as a good word, especially for some of us who are also into philosophy, because that notion of wanting to use science to explain everything is one that is likely to get some pushbacks. Yeah, but that's by the way. Now, in Africa, we, from a post-colonial perspective, we find at some points we support globalization. At some other points, we also support the anti-globalization movement. Now, we support globalization to the extent that it allows for Africans to be exposed to technologies, to modernity, and to the opportunities that come with free trade, opportunities that come with movement across borders, the opportunities for travel, the opportunities also for African products to make it to international markets. We support globalization to the extent that it allows education to come in, to the extent that it allows for, like I said, technologies and the opportunities that they bring, the internet, smartphones, and all that. Yeah, but on the other hand, some African theories are also for the anti-globalization movement. And this is especially when globalization becomes perceived as a new form of colonialism, or a new neoliberal Western imperialism. At that point, some African theorists rather present a pushback against globalization, especially when big companies, big multinationals come into Africa and they pose a threat to local industries and small businesses. Also at the cultural level, some persons feel threatened that African identity is likely to be eroded by further exposure to Western lifestyles. Also, when if we bring again, for example, the Monsanto issue, there environmentalists also see reason to join ranks with anti-globalists because it becomes like a twin issue. these big companies both um, destroy local businesses and as well destroy the environment. So in Africa, we have it's like a double-edged sword for us here. We have reasons to support globalization, but we also have some reasons to want to fight back against globalization. In the long run, we have to take stock and do the reckoning as to which benefits us the most. If we benefit more by participating in globalization compared to the losses we suffer, then uh, it's likely to be the case that Africans will still remain open to the idea of globalization. Just today, I was watching on Farid Zakaria GPS that even when the US is turning its back on free trade, when Britain is going the path of Brexit, Africa recently um, signed a continent-wide free trade agreement involving many countries in Africa. So the idea of free trade and this movement of goods and services across several boundaries is still one that is popular here in Africa. So yeah, I think in the long run, the globalizing idea of free movement of goods and people and services across national boundaries will win in the long run here in Africa.
I'd like to go. I'd like to return to your writing for a moment. You made reference to we spoke a few moments ago about changing the human form using biotechnology, using biomedical interventions, presumably germline changes to the human genome. But maybe even something more like other kinds that would be coming more quickly, like alterations that could be done to a person that would not affect their descendants in posterity. But we can contrast these kind of alterations to the human form, this kind of transhumanism, with a more digitalized transhumanism, which you mentioned in your book. We talk in your chapter. There was some discussion of mind uploading, and presumably related and also related notions, digital personhood and digital immortality. Earlier in the same selection, you talked about the atomic scientists of the 20th century contemplating their role in history. How do you feel that we should contemplate our role in thinking about these great powers that are being unleashed, either the alteration of the human form physically, or these ideas around digital personhood and immortality?
Again, I emphasize responsibility. It's said, with great power comes great responsibility. Now, if the technologies we have give us the power, gives us the power to alter human minds and human bodies, then the next thing is, how do we go about it? And it's only wisdom to decide to go about it in a responsible way. Now, for my chapter, what was basically considered there was, okay, so what is that basic organizing principle that we have to put our finger on if we're to go down to the basement of reality, to the ultimate constituent of the human person in trying to fundamentally transform the human body and the human mind. And for this, something even more fundamental to matter and mind, or which may be both matter and mind, was suggested. And this is what some scientists have called information. Uh, this information may be bits at the level of quantum physics, or they may be codes which rise to the layers to genetic code or the neural code. Yeah, but the idea there is there's this ultimate organizing principle both in the universe and in the human person, which if we can lay hold of it, we get access to so much power to re-engineer the human person and also re-engineer the cosmos. And for our paper, the argument was that this is what some physicists, some biologists, and some other scientists today call information as a fundamental ontology, serving as the building block of the universe, of life, and of the human person, of the human being. So if we can really, really understand what information is, and then get to use it for nanotechnology, for biotech, for digital immortality, and all these other visions that we have, then the next thing is we should try as much as possible to do this with a great sense of wisdom and responsibility. Yeah.
Very nice. And it is one of the main concerns for transhumanists is how to maintain the pace of technological progress, particularly with advanced algorithms, as advanced algorithms have been the drivers of improvement in so many other disciplines, but also not lead to some kind of social breakdown or unrest, or other kinds of very real problems that would derive from these potentially disruptive technologies. And it is a big concern that that many people in this community have. I spoke to a gentleman, David Kelly. He was kind enough to allow me to interview him, and he is of a mind that we should never do anything to slow down the development of AI, and that we will have nothing to worry about. These problems that would derive, that we imagine could derive from artificial personhood, these are good problems to have, that they would increase the likelihood of a post-scarcity outcome, increase the likelihood of other positive outcomes a great deal, and allow us to mitigate other risks that we already face as a civilization. Do you think that there is a regulatory, there is a role for regulating potentially advanced algorithms, or do you feel that we should allow the marketplace and other institutions to move forward as quickly as possible? You did touch upon this, but
yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the marketplace, and in as much as I do not quite agree with libertarian transhumanists, I also see the sense in allowing market forces to ultimately decide how algorithms get to be produced and used. Yeah, so I also argue for egalitarianism in the distribution of these technologies. Yeah, but in the long run, if it is such that we have as many businesses as possible producing or making algorithms available to the public, eventually there will be no such scenario as a monopoly. There may be no need for a government form of regulation. In the long run, the market or the market forces will stabilize the level to which these algorithms are made available, accessible to many. Yeah, so I will still take the position of free trade and free market in terms of how these algorithms should be produced and consumed by people, as opposed to having strict government regulations determining how these things go. Well, on the other hand, it doesn't mean I agree with um, the big capitalists, who may want to concentrate much of this control in their hands. So my argument is for free market, well, also a fair market, and also one with wide and equitable distribution of these resources. Now, for us here in Africa, when we talk about AI, of course, the ideals of digital immortality, they sound good, sound fantastic, and I hope we get there. But on a more um, um, on a more urgent note, and for more immediate purposes, we are looking at the potentials of AI to help us in agriculture, the potentials of AI to transform our educational system, potentials of AI to address our healthcare challenges in Africa, the potentials of AI to help us with issues of food and water, good drinking water, the potentials of AI to help us in our healthcare sector, in our energy sector, in our finance sector. These are basic immediate problems that we face here in Africa. And transhumanism will only gain wider acceptance here in Africa when it gets to prove itself as capable of many of these urgent issues that plague Africa as a continent. If we could use AI as well as biotech and clean and green tech and nanotech and these other transhumanist type technologies to solve many of these basic problems of poverty and hunger and disease and food scarcity here in Africa, then taking the longer view of AI and these other transhumanist technologies as promising longer lifespans, human longevity, or perhaps even immortality, will become one that Africans find easy or easier to embrace. So, in order for transhumanism not to sound too illusory or too unrealistic to Africans, our own focus, or what I think transhumanists who are concerned about Africa should focus more on about uh, in immediate terms, is how AI and other transhumanist technologies can address currently some social issues, some environmental issues, our basic economic problems, our health challenges, issues that we have with education, issues that lead to conflict and civil war, which for the most part boils down to inaccessibility uh, to 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 resources, or um, scarce resources that are not um, enough to go around. Um, the more we deploy these technologies to solve these problems, uh, the more Africa will be put on the path, a more prosperous trajectory that will um, enable it to be more welcoming of some of the other far-fetched, rather far-fetched goals of transhumanism, which has to do with life extension, digital immortality, and augmentation of humans, or voluntary amputation for prosthetics and all that. So basically, these type transhumanist technologies can be used to solve our immediate problems, and then they open the way for acceptance to the wider goals or the long-term goals of transhumanism.
Very nice, very nice. And we've spoken earlier in this talk about techno-singularitarian effects, perhaps reaching civilizations at different times. So there could even coming at a fast pace, there could be significant differences there. We've also mentioned moments ago this notion that people living on any continent conceivably might realistically reject some of these techno-singularitarian developments because they would see them as fanciful, they would see them as unrealistic or otherwise otherworldly. These are very, very real concerns. In your text, in this chapter about big history, you talk a little bit about these future technologies, nanotechnology, even describing an artificial singleton to some degree. Do you think that we are on a good trajectory to be developing these things? And do you think that this holds promise for the Nigerian people? Do you think that I concern myself with people in the United States as well rejecting these technologies? There have been any number of technologies in the past that have not been made use of because people have not taken a popular interest in them, or people have been disgusted by them. Give us a little more of an assessment of your feelings on this subject.
All right. Of course, one should anticipate resistance, especially when you're talking about something new and something which people don't understand. So, be it in the United States or be it here in Nigeria and Africa, transhumanism, it's a relatively new idea, and much of its projections are easily misunderstood, and as such, one shouldn't be surprised when people fear them. But on the other hand, there's a way these transhumanist technologies gradually seep into our lives even without us being conscious of them. And then eventually it may not be that much of a dramatic or drastic transformation the way some singularitarians portray it. It may not be a momentous event, but it may be a gradual progression from here to there. Maybe a seamless transition that bit by bit we adopt this technology here, we adopt this one there, piecemeal, and then over time they are already becoming part of our lives, and it is becoming increasingly difficult for us to even draw where we end and where they begin. So it may just be that overnight or sometime in the future, and find that technology has been into consciousness because it happened through our everyday to-day experience and adoption of the technologies we use in our daily lives. So yeah, in as much as the fear is to be expected, but eventually people may get used to it. There will still be those who will reject it in the Amish type of the Amish way of doing things. That's the way the Amish reject much of the technologies we use today. There will still be a new Amish type community in this future we're talking about.
Yes.
That's normal. Yeah, but I have confidence that the majority of humanity, if these technologies are widely distributed and made equally accessible, the majority of humanity, after an initial period of fear or skepticism, will find that it is rather to use these technologies. And hello?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, it's rather, it will become rather indispensable to use technologies, and neglecting them may leave one at the risk of becoming obsolete. So, yeah, so my argument is that the singularity may happen as a gradual evolutionary process and not that much of a cataclysmic shift or that much of a dramatic transformation. Yeah, but having said that, I think here in Africa, what will enable more Africans to accept transhumanist technologies is if they are presented as solutions to our basic problems. Now, I notice here in Africa, we have so many people living with disabilities. We have people suffering from polio. We have people who have lost their limbs as a cause of one accident or the other, that due to bad roads, due to leading to road accidents or maybe physical attack. I have friends today who use prosthetic limbs, uh, having lost them either in a fight or in an accident. Now, these people use these prosthetic limbs out of necessity. But then when I sit back and I look at them, how they depend on artificial limbs, I see like what we call uh, an initial generation of of Nigerians or Africans who are gradually going down the path of this man-machine fusion. Some of them are not very well aware of what is happening to them. Yeah, but um, they now live their lives uh, as a kind of a cooperation between a human and a machine. Uh, Now, um, some of these people may have socially conservative views on the surface against transhumanism. They may have religious views that resist some transhumanist ideas, but because artificial limbs have come to them as a matter of necessity, they accept it, and they get to show the rest of society what it looks like for uh, a human to be part human, part machine. Now, if more of such technologies, prosthetics, are brought into Africa in response to the problems of people living with disabilities, or other ones coming as response to people living with mental disabilities, um, this would gradually uh, prepare the ground, gradually bring some level of normalcy in the public view as to um, a new kind of human that is part man, part machine. Because the more people get to see others that live like this as a way to get on with their life, the more it becomes a new normal. Um, when to accept human machine interactions, and then the fear or the resistance that could have happened when cyborgs are introduced will be greatly reduced. Yeah, so I think cashing in on the problem of people living with physical or and mental disabilities as an opportunity to bring in transhumanist technologies, solving these problems would gradually prepare the mind of the public um, ahead of more transhumanist technologies to come. And as such, the resistance will be reduced. This, to me, is the way transhumanism can succeed in Africa by first of all coming as a solution to immediate problems. If transhumanist technologies solve most of our immediate problems, they stand the chance um, uh, of gaining normalcy in the lives of people. And then when um, the higher, the more far-reaching types of transhumanist technologies are introduced, the level of resistance will be minimal. On the other hand, the level of acceptance may be even higher than one could expect. Yeah, so, if transhumanist technologies can solve our economic, physical, environmental, social, educational, and health challenges that we face currently in Africa, this will make many more Africans open to transhumanism, and the technologies will become a normal part of our lives. And as such, we could join the rest of the world in a gradual, seamless transition to the singularity.
Very, very interesting. And you, a few moments ago, you spoke about the fusing of man and machine as an individualized experience. In the concluding remarks of your chapter, you spoke of this on the more macro scale, referencing Frank Tipler and the concept of the omega point. It calls back what you said also just a moment ago as well. Do you think that this outcome is a likely outcome for in big history? Do you think that it's a likely outcome by the end of our century? Do you think that it's a good thing to happen?
Yeah, I think it's a good thing to happen. But as for the time scale, if it is likely by the end of our century, I'm not so sure, because sometimes when I study futurism and I see the time scales that are projected, some of these the visions of humans getting to that level of becoming one with the cosmos, or merging our consciousness with that of the cosmos, or getting to that omega point level. It's one that will not happen with our own type of civilization. It may take a type 2 or type 3 kind of civilization. Which, sorry?
It's referring
Hello?
to the Kardashev scale.
Yeah, the Kardashev scale. Yeah, so this may require higher levels of energy and um, more more sophisticated technologies. But on the other hand, we are also aware of exponential technologies, or the exponentiality of technological development. And as such, the level of acceleration may be even faster than others have projected. Um, and then the intersections between technologies, the convergence of one technological breakthrough having ripple effect in other technological areas. A breakthrough in nanotech leads to a breakthrough in biotech. A breakthrough in biotech leads to another breakthrough in cognitive sciences, in material sciences. So one could never tell. It may just take one breakthrough in one technology that will spark a chain reaction of other breakthroughs. And as such, what may have taken 1,000 or more years to happen may happen within a century. So, in as much as um, those who call for a bit more uh, modesty, modesty and some level of reservation in placing these time scales. Uh, in as much as they would rather um, push the actualization of some of these visions into the far future. It is also likely, on the other hand, that a series of technological breakthroughs could, at dizzying speed, could make these things to happen even um, faster than we think. And as such, some of these things may happen within this century, even within our lifetimes. And if it becomes the case that life extension or human longevity becomes possible in our own lifetime, then many of us may also live long enough to see the realization of so many of these technological dreams. Yeah, so they could happen in this century, or some of us may live into more centuries to come to see them happen. Yeah, but in any case, um, I think we live in a time when some of us have cause to be cautiously optimistic that we will witness um, the actualization of some of these technological dreams that transhumanism comes up with.
Mm. Very nice, very nice. And I want to again remind our listeners that Dr. Ojochogwu Abdul will be presenting at the Techno-Scientific Awareness Conference coming up October 7th to 11th in Kigali, Rwanda. Tickets are still available. Please get involved. Reach out to our mutual friend, Osinakachi Kalu, if you like. And you can also go to the website, conference2019.taffds.org, and participate in this. Say hello to Dr. Abdul. He's a wonderful man. Dr. Abdul, do you have anything that you would like to tell us about your presentation, or any other remarks that you would like to make about your chapter in the Transhumanist Handbook? Please give us some of your concluding remarks at this time.
Okay, I would rather talk about my upcoming presentation at the Techno-Scientific Awareness Conference.
Yes.
Okay, so my paper is titled Transhumanism and African Enlightenment in the 21st Century.
Mm.
Now, the basic idea of that presentation is that transhumanism, as it is a continuation of the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment, which was that event that happened across 2 centuries, from the 17th to 18th century in Europe, flowing into North America and some part of the Caribbean. Now, it is the argument of people like James Hughes, which I respect a lot, that transhumanism is a continuation of the Enlightenment project, or some may call it Enlightenment 2.0. Transhumanism, it's like the unfinished business of the Enlightenment. So it is an Enlightenment philosophy, especially in its promotion of science and reason and freedom and the maximization of human potential. But we here in Africa are yet to have our own enlightenment moment. The enlightenment that scholars talk about didn't happen in Africa. So we envisage an African enlightenment as that period in our own history too, that will lead to great transformations in human life and in our social, economic, cultural, and political institutions. Now, my argument is that transhumanism as an enlightenment philosophy, and which the more potential that it has, will be utilized into making the African enlightenment happen in the 21st century. The technologies that come with transhumanism, as well as transhumanist thoughts, transhumanist education, could be harnessed into bringing about a transformation in our our industrial processes, in our industrialization experience generally. It could be harnessed into leading us to a new era of cultural modernization or cultural post-modernization. It could be harnessed into um, um, enabling individuals with this sense of freedom, this sense of this rational approach to investigating nature, as well as the application of science and reason um, in, in 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 developing our economic, our political, our social institutions. Um, it could also be be used by Africans um, in tackling our economic problems and in pursuing the dream of an economic transformation in Africa, especially when we get to use the transhumanist technologies in the proper way, in solving problems and in infusing much energy into our economy. So my argument is there are several ways through which the promises of transhumanism could be adapted into the African condition, into bringing about this revolution, both in our mentality, a revolution in our culture, as well as a revolution in our scientific and technological situations, a revolution in our industry, a revolution in our education, and a revolution in our philosophies generally, in such a way that what what will eventually follow will be seen and respected as an African Enlightenment moment. And I strongly believe that this is possible to have in the 21st century. So I think there's an opportunity for transhumanism to bring its philosophy and its technologies to apply to the African situation and to key it into what has already begun as the scientific revolution on the continent. Because yes, there is something happening in terms of science in Africa currently. There is silent scientific revolution. There's also an ongoing silent mental revolution. Revolution against authoritarianism, against anachronism, against superstition and supernaturalism. So we are already on the path towards an enlightenment type of thinking. We only need more push, and this will come through the transhumanist ideas, transhumanist ideals, and transhumanist technologies. If properly channeled, all of this could set Africa on the path towards an enlightenment, on the path towards participating in the fourth industrial revolution that some societies of the world have already entered or are already introduced, and as well put Africa on a level footing with the rest of the world in its march towards a transhuman civilization. Yeah, so I think, and I strongly, I'm strongly convinced that transhumanism is what Africa needs at this moment in its history, and if used in the proper way, it could put an end to our dark centuries of technological oblivion and bring about a new era of positive change on the continent.
Very nice. Well, so you've given me a lot to think about in terms of big history and transhumanism, in terms of future techno history and outcomes on the civilizational scale. I thank you for speaking with me, sir. It's always a pleasure. You always give me so many new things to think about. And thank you for giving us these wonderful insights. I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend.
You too, Ben. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Abdul.